Aren't we lucky to have heard that original recording of a man in 1512 zipping up his coat, ready for a big outdoor adventure? Simply magnificent. Hello there, and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan. I might try and do another video podcast next week, but it just takes quite a long time, and I'm technologically not the most advanced person in the world, so it's the editing and all that, it's hard for me. It's hard, but I think it might be quite fun to do some more of those if I can pluck up the courage to. But until then, we're in audio form, as per usual. No big Shakespeare news this week, I don't think, unless you have seen any in the news, in which case please tell me. But as far as I know, he's still dead and still has lots of plays and sonnets out in the world, and people still like them, as far as I know, and there aren't any new ones that people have found. So that's the Shakespeare news done and dusted. Let's move on to our next sonnet, which is Sonnet 105. Let not my love be called idolatry, nor my beloved as an idol show, since all alike my songs and praises be to one of one, still such and ever so. Kind is my love today, tomorrow kind, still constant in a wondrous excellence. Therefore my verse to constancy confined, one thing expressing, leaves out difference. Fair, kind, and true is all my argument. Fair, kind, and true, varying to other words, and in this change is my invention spent. Three themes in one, which wondrous scope affords. Fair, kind, and true have often lived alone, which three, till now, never kept seat in one. So there we have it, Sonnet 105. And there's three words that stand out to me in this one. I don't know if they stand out to you as well, but fair, kind, and true obviously get quite a lot of exposure. They're repeated 3 times. It's the power of 3. Almost like Shakespeare has just taken his, GCSEs or... When did we learn the power of 3 in English? Probably about 14, 15. Anyway, he's using that, the power of 3. 1, 2, 3, fair, kind, and true. And yeah, it is powerful. Well done. And of course, the main theme here is idolatry and how he isn't idolizing his beloved, his lover, the man that he's been talking about for the last 105 sonnets. And I did have to do a little bit of research on this one, because as I was reading it, I thought there's quite a tone shift here. And I'm not talking about, he's not talking about spring and winter and the seasons and all that, but there's a certain style that he's using that seems quite formal when I was reading it. So I looked up, what's the deal with 105? Why is there a strange tone that he's using? And according to some people, a lot of people in fact, is that there's a sort of joke that he's doing here in the way that he's written it. And so of course he's talking about idolatry and how he isn't idolizing his lover, but the language that he's using is a similar tone and similar words to the language used by Christians or in sermons at the time to describe God. So idolizing God. So there's sort of this underlying gag that he's writing in this Christian idolatry way in a poem where he's saying that he isn't idolizing his lover. So there's a joke there to be had. I got to say I didn't initially laugh out loud, but maybe at the time it would have been funnier. Now it's less a laugh, isn't it? It's probably not. I mean, if you did laugh at 105, if you were reading that and going, oh, that's good, that's clever, he's very clever, and just sort of laughing to yourself, then I guess you knew more about religious writing and how people referred to God in the 1500s than I did, and fair play to you. But anyway, it's good to have that in the back of your head as we work through this line by line, that there is a tone shift, and he is kind of almost taking the piss out of the way Christians idolize God, potentially. That is a theory, but to me it does sort of make sense. Anyway, let's break this down line by line and work out what the hell Shakespeare was going on about in 105. So we start with, "Let not my love be called idolatry." Pretty self-explanatory. He's saying, don't let anyone call my love idolatry. Then he continues, "Nor my beloved as an idle show." Similar thought, and saying that don't let anyone say that I treat my beloved, my young lover that I've talked about before, as an idol. I don't. So stop saying that I do. "Since all alike my songs and praises be, to one, of one, still such, and ever so." That line there, you see, that line does sound to me very religious sermon-esque. To one, of one, still such, and ever so. That's my impression of maybe a vicar or a priest. And here he's saying, all of my poems and praises are addressed to one person, and they're about one person, and they always will be. All right, yeah, we know that because you've written 105 sonnets about one person, so I imagine that that's going to be the case forevermore. Although, spoiler alert, maybe not. Maybe he will move on to someone else at some point. So he's saying, I think I get why you might call my love idolatry, and why you think I might treat my beloved as an idol, because all of my poems and praises are to one person, and they're always about one person. They always will be. So I get it. I get the argument. Then he continues with, "Kind is my love today, tomorrow kind, still constant in a wondrous excellence." So here he's saying my love is kind today, and also, by the way, my love will be kind tomorrow, because it's always constant in wondrous excellence. His love is always the same, it will always be constant. "Therefore my verse to constancy confined, one thing expressing, leaves out difference." So he's saying, therefore, my poetry is confined and about one subject, aka his lover, and that always remains the same. It always expresses the same thing, love, etc., etc., and nothing different. It's almost like he's taking the piss out of his readers here, isn't it? Because we know this, Shakespeare. We've read all of your other sonnets, 104 sonnets we've read before this, and we know that all of your sonnets are about how much you love this young man. So you don't need to tell us. And now we move on to fair, kind, and true is all my argument. Fair, kind, and true, varying to other words. So the subject of his poems is always the same. It's fair, aka beautiful, kind, aka kind. I don't think I can translate that one really. And true, I think in this sense, true is faithful, really. So the subject of his poems is always beautiful, kind, and faithful. And he writes about those three words in varying ways, varying to other words. So it's not just the three words, but it's all about that, really, just different ways of putting it. And in this change is my invention spent. So writing these three words in different ways is basically, that's how he spends all his creativity, is writing about fair, kind, and true in various different ways, and that is how he spends his days. That is his invention spent. That's it, all right? It's just trying to write about his lover being fair, kind and true in as many ways as possible. It's a simple life. 3 themes in one, which wondrous scope affords. So he's saying these 3 themes, fair, kind and true, all rolled into one person, aka his lover, and actually that offers amazing scope for a poet. Wondrous scope. I mean, the possibilities are endless, he's saying here, really. You don't need to write about more when you've got that. And now we're on to the final couplet. Fair, kind and true have often lived alone, which 3, till now, never kept seat in one. So here he's saying, fair, kind and true, they've often lived alone in other people, so you might find someone who's fair, who's beautiful, but they don't necessarily have the kindness and the faithfulness. Someone might be faithful, but they might not be beautiful, unfortunately for them. So they often live separately. But the 3 of them were never together in one person, Shakespeare's lover, until now. What an amazing guy. I guess we could call him a triple threat of really good looking, very kind, and incredibly faithful. Although, if we are talking about the same guy, he famously hasn't been very faithful in the last however many sonnets. He's been potentially sleeping around quite a lot. So, I'm not sure if this is the same lover when you think about it. Anyway, maybe Shakespeare's already forgotten about his lovers sleeping about. So there we have it, Sonnet 105, and I think it's about time we put this to our story. Now, if you remember last week, Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe, they'd sort of broken apart because Shakespeare was kind of going a bit insane and was being very clingy, and the relationship wasn't going in the right direction. So Christopher Marlowe said, look, we need a break. We need to take time apart. Not necessarily a break. It seemed like he was going to break off the whole thing. It wasn't just for a bit of time. He was saying, look, we can't be together, Shakespeare. It's not going to work out. And so months passed and Shakespeare was really struggling being apart from Christopher Marlowe. And he was just sort of starting to get over him, leave the house a bit more, potter about London. And then he was passing, the famous pub, the Nag's Head, friend of the podcast. And he looked through the window to see if any of his mates were there. Guess who's there? Sat in the corner. It's Christopher Marlowe. And he's having a great time. He's chatting, he's laughing. And Shakespeare gets inspired to write him a sonnet, Sonnet 104. So he scrawls that down. And obviously it's all about how young and beautiful Christopher Marlowe is. And there is some stuff about aging and about how aging is sort of very slowly happening and your beauty is fading away. It's not, ideal to put in a love poem, but hey, Shakespeare is Shakespeare and he'll do what he wants. And he gets this young lad outside to read the poem to Christopher Marlowe. So he went into the pub and read the poem to Christopher Marlowe, and that's where we left off. So let's see what happens next and how 105 fits into all this. The little boy finished reading Shakespeare's Sonnet 104 to Christopher Marlowe in the Nag's Head. Marlowe said, "Who wrote this?" And the little boy said, "Oh no, I've forgotten his name. Oh God, what is it? Shakespeare? Something like that." And Marlowe says, "Not William Shakespeare, is it?" And the boy said, "That's the one. Look, he's just outside there." And he points to the window, and Shakespeare quickly ducks down. He'd been looking in to see how Christopher Marlowe reacted. And Marlowe said, "Oh, bloody hell. I thought Shakespeare had forgotten all about me. But clearly, he still loves me. Oh, what am I to do?" He looks at the window again and can see Shakespeare's little hat and feather poking into frame. He goes outside and says, "Shakespeare, what are you doing?" Shakespeare still crouched on the ground. He goes, "Oh, hello. What are you? No way. Christopher Marlowe, what are you doing here?" And Marlowe says, "Shakespeare, I know that the sonnet was from you. You told the boy to say it was from you." "Yeah, no, that was me. Yeah, you got me. That was me. I did write that. But you're not really meant to see me. That was just sort of just a little goodbye sonnet in a way, just to say, see you later, lots of love, you're beautiful, and hope you don't get old. That was all." Marlowe says, "Shakespeare, I thought we'd been over this. You need to try and forget me. We are never, do you hear me, ever going to be together. So just forget about me." And Shakespeare says, "Yeah, no, obviously I have forgotten about you. I just happened to be walking past and thought, oh, look, it's Christopher Marlowe. He looks really nice. He looks really hot. And yeah, so I just was inspired to write. What? So what? Can't a guy write? Can't the great William Shakespeare write a sonnet for his good friend?" Marlowe says, "Look, I suppose so. Anyway, I'll see you later, Shakespeare." And he claps him on the back and heads back into the Nag's Head for another pint. Shakespeare hangs his head and wanders home. The words of Marlowe ringing in his ear, "We will never, ever be together." A few weeks later, it's Sunday morning, and Shakespeare gets a knock on his door. Sounds a bit like a horse was knocking on the door there. "Who is it? Who is it?" cries Shakespeare. "It's me, Ben Jonson. Open the door." Shakespeare, still in his dressing gown. His dressing gown has WS embroidered on the breast. For William Shakespeare, of course. It's a lovely gown, actually. And he opens up the door and says, "What do you want, Ben? I'm tired. It's a Sunday." And Ben says, "Don't you want to go to church?" And Shakespeare says, "Oh, not really. I never go to church." And Ben Jonson says, "I thought it might be quite nice to just pop to church this Sunday, hear some nice sermons. Might be quite interesting." And Shakespeare says, "Oh, God, I don't know. I don't know if I feel up for it." Ben says, "Well, you know someone's going to be there." "Who's going to be there? Who's going to be there? Will God be there?" "Well, yeah, God might be there. Well, he probably will be, actually. But no, I wasn't thinking about God. I was thinking about Christopher Marlowe." And Shakespeare said, "Look, I'm trying to forget about Christopher Marlowe. He clearly doesn't want to be with me anymore." Ben Jonson says, "All right, look, I just thought you'd like to know that Christopher Marlowe was going to be at church today, and you might just see him and say hi and try and be friends again, maybe." Shakespeare thinks for a moment and goes, "Oh, fine, let's go to church. Let me pop on my shoes and take off this lovely dressing gown." Ben Jonson and William Shakespeare walk along the London streets. It's a beautiful Sunday morning. The sun is shining, and eventually they reach the church. You know, the church in London, that one church that there is. And they go inside, sit down at the back of the church like naughty schoolboys, and await the sermon. 5 minutes later, Christopher Marlowe walks in. He hasn't seen Shakespeare. He walks straight past him to the front and takes his seat. Eventually, the priest comes out and says, "Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my sermon. Today we will be talking about God and how great he is. It is important to idolize him and worship him, as he is the Almighty." And as the priest keeps talking, Shakespeare thinks, this is interesting, isn't it? This guy is telling us to idolize God, just like I was accused of idolizing Christopher Marlowe by him and all his friends. What a joke. And then he started laughing, quite loudly actually, and the priest stopped what he was doing and said, "Are you okay there in the back?" And Shakespeare said, "Yeah, no, sorry, I was just laughing to myself." And the priest said, "Care to share the joke?" Shakespeare said, No, I'm all good, Sorry, carry on. And of course, he was laughing about the poem he was about to write, Sonnet 105, which would take the tone of the priest and twist it in a hilarious way to talk about idolatry and how he didn't idolise Christopher Marlowe, but just how he liked to write about him, and that was fine. So he quickly started scribbling down Sonnet 105, and he was laughing the whole time. Ben Jonson was going, "Shakespeare, you've got to stop laughing, mate. What are you doing?" And Shakespeare says, "Sorry, this is so funny while I'm writing. You're going to love it. I'll tell you what, I'll read it to you outside." And eventually finishes writing. The sermon ends. Shakespeare and Ben Jonson pop outside. And Christopher Marlowe eventually comes out. They lock eyes. Shakespeare says, "Hello?" Marlowe says, "Morning." Shakespeare says, "I don't suppose you want to hear this really hilarious poem that I just wrote in that sermon." Marlowe said, yeah, I could do with a laugh, I suppose. But it better not be about me and how much you love me." And Shakespeare says, "Well, no, it's not really about that. It's more satire, really. And I think you're going to like it. Actually, Ben Jonson, you should listen to this as well. Look, both of you, come with me. We'll find a little quiet spot." And so they take a little walk into the graveyard for some reason. That seems like the best place to read this bit of satire. And Shakespeare clears his throat and says, "You ready?" They both nod. And Shakespeare reads Sonnet 105. "Let no one call my love idolatry, or that I say my beloved is an idol, since all my poems and praises are to one person and will be forever. My love is kind today, and will be kind tomorrow, always constant in wondrous excellence. Therefore my poems are confined to a subject that is always the same, never different. My poems are about the beautiful, kind, and faithful. I write beautiful, kind, and faithful in various ways, and this is what I spend all my creativity on. 3 themes in one, which gives me wonderful, inventive scope. Beauty, kindness, and faithful have often lived separately from one another. The 3 of them were never together as one until now." So there we have it, Sonnet 105 and our little story to go with it. I sure hope Christopher Marlowe and Ben Jonson found that as hilarious as Shakespeare did as he wrote it in that church. Well, let's find out their reaction next week. Until then, bye.